Hey, what's going on, everybody? In this video, I'm just going to kind of be doing a quick refresher course on Elden Ring. With the new Shadow of the Erdtree DLC coming out soon, I started to get back into the game a little bit, and was honestly surprised how much I had forgotten everything and felt a little bit lost trying to remember all the different mechanics and items and whatnot. So I started a fresh playthrough and jotted down some notes while I was going through that, which I thought might be helpful for people like me who have taken a break from the game for a while and kind of are now getting back into it in anticipation of the DLC coming out. So this isn't going to be like fully comprehensive or anything, but it should cover most of the main stuff just to kind of get you going again. I'm kind of coming at this from the perspective that you've played Elden Ring before, and this will just kind of help jog your memory a little bit. That being said, if you are completely new to the game, this should be useful as well. I'm just not going to get super detailed in each of the topics that I cover. And then finally, kind of wrapping things up at the end of this video, if you are starting a fresh playthrough and you just kind of want to get leveled up and powerful really quick and kind of skip the early grind again, I'll share a couple tips on how you can easily do that as well. Alright, so starting off with just some of the basic stuff and refamiliarizing yourself with the menu system, how to navigate that and find things, and the various UI aspects, because there's quite a bit there. So starting off, let me get rid of my face so you can see what I'm doing here. If you click your menu or start button, that'll bring up the various menus you can click into. Kind of going through these real quick, just starting with equipment. That's going to be where obviously you can find your weapons and your armor and things. So it'll tell you what you're looking at in the top left. So this is the right hand armament, left hand armament. For each one of these, you get up to 3 slots. So we can assign 3 different weapons to our right hand. You also have bolts and arrows slots over here, so you can equip those there. On your left hand, similarly, you've got 3 slots. There's also shields, so if you have shields, you can equip those as well. Moving back to armor, again, whatever you have available will be within each one of those slots, and so you can equip a helmet, unequip it. Talismans, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that's where those are. You can equip those there. And then finally, your 8 quick item slots. So a bunch of different stuff you can apply in those. So if we back out, that kind of corresponds to your D-pad for the most part. Bottom left part of the screen, you can see a couple different boxes. So the left D-pad will be for your left hand. So if I click my left D-pad, that'll cycle through that weapon and that shield that I applied there. And then the right D-pad will cycle through those 3 right-hand weapons that I applied. The down D-pad cycles through all of those quick items, and then the up D-pad is for spells and incantations. Moving on to inventory. So kind of that same concept as equipment, but it's more comprehensive. Basically, all of the items that you've collected as you're playing through can be found here. You can cycle through various categories with your shoulder buttons. So like here's our spells and incantations, our Ashes of War. We'll talk more about some of this stuff, but basically all of your inventory is found here. And then for each category, you can go through and, cycle through items and get descriptions and item effects. So in the middle of the screen for this fire grease, for example, it'll tell you what it does. You can also hit X. You can see the hotkeys down at the bottom for what buttons to push to do what. But if you hit X, that will bring up like sort of a more detailed description for all of the items as well. So within each one, if you hit A for a particular item, you can also use them directly in the inventory, or you can leave or discard as well, so you can drop items that way too. Status, real quick, this is just kind of showing your character as it is in all the various stats, so what level you are, how many runes you have, your attributes, various other stat points, so that is there under the status menu. Now if we go over to the right side of the screen, that's where our pouch and gestures menu is. So starting with the pouch, this is another really useful mechanic that just kind of gives you quick access to some more of your items. This is assigned to your D-pad. You can see which button does what. So there's 4 slots for your D-pad, and then you've got 2 additional ones here as well. Bottom of the screen, that kind of tells you what button to push to do what as well. So if we want to switch this item, we can hit Y and assign, for example, these poison darts to the up D-pad for our pouch. So if we back out again, it's going to be the same menu in the bottom left with where we switch our weapons and use our quick items. However, for this, if you hold, for me, it's the left bumper button. So depending on what your controller setup is, that's the event action hotkey, the left bumper for me on the Xbox controller. So if you hold that down, that will switch to what those 4 items in your pouch are. So if you hold that down and then hit the up D-pad, for example, that will throw the poison dart, and then let go of the left bumper, and then you're back to your weapons and your quick items and your spells and incantations. So that's really useful. You also do have those 2 additional slots, so you can use those directly there as well. And then the gestures, that's just kind of fun little things that you'll find. You'll find new gestures to pick up and use as you're playing the game, but you can use those as well. And then the last thing, which we haven't really talked about yet on the screen here, is the upper left part of the screen. So, oh, I'm back. Hey, how's it going? We've got the big box, which is your great rune that you're using. That's more of a later game thing as you defeat bosses. But that's the icon for whatever rune you're using. The red bar is your health. The blue bar is your FP or focus points. That's what you use for magic and special moves and whatnot. And then the green bar is your stamina. Below those, you're going to have some boxes occasionally, depending. Those are for buffs and debuffs, so if you have any of those active, those will appear on the screen with those icons that represent those buffs and debuffs as well. Next, taking a look at some of the map functionality and just some tips around using that. So you can bring that up anytime, and it'll show you the world map of what you found so far. This kind of expands as you progress through the game. And then each area has to be uncovered through finding a map fragment. So you can see this particular area, I haven't found the fragment yet. And to do that, you want to look for this icon here. That's going to tell you where that fragment is found. So we'll head over there right now just kind of as a demonstration to show you how that works. So we're getting closer to that icon on the map you can see here. And then once you get there, you'll see the item that you can pick up on the ground. So it'll look something like this. Walk up to it. You'll see pick up item, and now we've got the map fragment for Liurnia North. And so if we open up our map, you can see we've got a new area that's been found, and we've got all of the detail uncovered for this particular section of the map now. A couple other callouts with the map since we've got it up, just kind of talking about some of these icons. So the yellow circles, those are sites of grace, which we'll talk about next. You can use those as like fast travel waypoints. So once you've activated them, you can then fast travel back to that site of grace whenever you want, which is nice. Some of them have these kind of flamey arrows. That's leading you to a particular area where it's going to progress the main storyline. So if you're kind of lost and don't know where to go to progress the story, you can use that as a hint of go in that general direction, essentially. And then there's all sorts of icons for points of interest and landmarks and whatnot, and caves and forts and all sorts of good stuff. These Everjail icons, those are a little bit unique, so you'll find little mini boss fights in these guys. There's another one over here. That's another Everjail. On the bottom part of the screen, you can see some of the hotkeys to use. So you can place markers. So if you hit X, you can use that if you find a treasure or a dungeon that you want to return to that isn't marked using one of the main icons. You can place your own marker there. You can also use beacons, which are really useful. So if you hit A to place a beacon, we can do that. We can put a couple of them here. So then those will appear on your compass in the top middle part of the screen, so you can see those 3 markers that I put there. And then you'll also see them visibly on the screen. So there's that one, and then the other one over there. So if you're trying to get to a particular area, you can put a beacon on the map and then just start kind of running towards that laser beam, which is helpful as well. Also, one other thing that I forgot to call out was that there are 2 levels to the map. So you have the surface level map, which we're currently looking at, and then if you click in on your right joystick, that's going to show you the underground as well. So once you've gotten to the point in the game where you've discovered these areas, so this is the Siofra River Well. There's also a couple others, but that map is also available. So you can sort of switch between surface level view and underground on the map. So as we just saw on the map, there's going to be sites of grace scattered around all over the place. And this is one that I haven't activated yet, so you can see it's not available. But you can go up to it once you find it, touch grace, that will activate it and unlock it as a fast travel point. And so if we open up our map, we can now see that we've got a new site of grace active. And it's also, again, leading to another aspect of the story, which is why it's got this little flamey thing next to it. So not only can you use it as fast travel, but it's got a couple other features that are super useful that you'll be using quite a bit. So we'll talk about that next. Starting off, so when you activate a new site of grace and you're next to it, you'll now have a prompt where you can rest at the site of grace. When you do that, you're going to get put into another menu system. It's also going to have a couple other impacts as well. So this will fully heal you. It's also going to restore any flasks that you've used. So if you run out of health flasks or FP flasks, you can come to a Site of Grace and get those fully restored. However, when you do that, it's also going to reset the game world. So anytime you rest at a Site of Grace, any monsters or enemies that you've killed are going to get revived again. So if you go to an area, kill a bunch of enemies, come back to heal at a Site of Grace, you can do that. But if you go back to that area, all those enemies are going to be alive again. So you kind of have to keep that in mind when you're using these. Going through the menu, kind of rapid fire here. Passing time, so you can quickly go to morning, noon, or night. There are some enemies that only appear at night, so that's kind of one use case there. This is where you level up, so you have to level up your character at a Site of Grace. If you have enough runes, you can choose new attribute points by leveling up your character here. Flask management, so there's a couple different things you can do. You can increase the amount of flasks that you have by turning in golden seeds. You find golden seeds throughout the world. They're like golden trees, and then at the bottom there's a seed that you can collect. As you collect those, you can then turn them in here to increase how many flask charges that you have. You can also increase the amount that is replenished each time you use a flask charge. That's by turning in sacred tears. Similar to golden tears or golden seeds, you'll find these throughout the world. I think they're primarily in ruined churches. You can collect those again and then sort of turn those in here to increase how much health or how much FP gets restored each time you use a flask. And then finally, you can also allocate how many of each type of flask you have. So again, using golden seeds, I now have 8 charges that I can use, and then I can decide how many of each. So I can do like 4 and 4, or I can be like really heavy on health and not so on FP and do like 7 and 1. So that's where you can do that allocation. Moving down the list, memorizing spells and incantations. So at the beginning of this video, I mentioned you use the up D-pad for your spells and incantations. So this is where you would assign those here at the Site of Grace. Wondrous Physick, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that's kind of like a third flask type. But as you collect tiers, they have different properties and attributes. So you can use this to kind of create a combination and apply that to your Wondrous Physick. There is a chest. I never actually use this. I don't know if it's necessary, but if you want to sort of organize your inventory, you can put stuff in a chest, which is then accessible by visiting a Site of Grace. Great runes. Again, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but as you defeat bosses, you'll get great runes, and then this is where you would assign which great rune you want to have active. I'll touch a little bit more on that later. And then finally, Ashes of War. Again, I'll kind of maybe touch on this a little bit more later as well in more detail, but this is where you would assign those. But basically, you can select a weapon and then assign which Ash of War you want for that particular weapon. So that's done there. So quite a bit of like management system, place to heal, but also keep in mind that when you use this, all of the enemies that you've killed will be reset again. All right, so now kind of going back and touching on some items that I've mentioned so far, as well as a couple other miscellaneous things. Starting with the Wondrous Physick. So this is an item that you can get pretty early game at this Church of America. So this is the starting location, so it's pretty nearby. Just kind of make your way over here if you don't have it, and you can get that item. As mentioned, it's kind of a third additional flask that you can use. However, you do only get 1 charge before you need to rest at a Site of Grace to use it again. But it does provide a variety of benefits that you can kind of customize. So if you look at my quick menu here, I've got my healing flask, my FP flask, and then the Wondrous Physick. So this is customized using crystal tears that you can find throughout the game. There's a whole bunch of them that have a variety of effects, and you can mix 2 of them together to create sort of a customized elixir. So it's a really nice item to have, and you can find crystal tears primarily around minor Erdtrees and various other parts of the game. But again, go to a Site of Grace. You can choose 2 of those crystal tears to mix to create and customize your Wondrous Physick. Next, looking at Great Runes. So you get these after defeating some of the main bosses in the game. You can see which one you currently have equipped in the top left part of the screen. So currently I have Godric the Grafted's Great Rune equipped. These can be found in the inventory under your key items section. So you can see here I've got Godric's Great Rune. You can see the effect as well. This raises all attributes. To sort of get that effect though, you need to use a rune arc, which also can be found in your inventory right here. So when you use this, that will then turn on that great rune effect, and that will be active until you die, essentially. So you'll have it the whole time, but once you die, you would then have to use another rune arc to use it again. Also, another call out, once you acquire the Great Rune, it's not necessarily available yet. You have to go to a Divine Tower to activate it, essentially. So this is where I'm at currently for this particular Great Rune. It's at the Divine Tower of Limgrave. So once you defeat the boss and get the rune, you still need to go and find that Divine Tower, and then you'll come over to this thing to activate it, so you have it available. Now going a bit into Ashes of War. So these are abilities that you can use and apply to weapons to kind of customize their attacks a little bit. It only applies to certain weapons. So if you have a unique weapon like Bloodhound's Fang, which I currently have equipped, that has its own unique attack or special ability called Bloodhound's Finesse, which you can see above the D-pad menu on the left there. So you can't override that, but any kind of generic weapons you can customize with Ashes of War. So those are done with whetstones. So if we go into our inventory here and under key items, there are a variety of whetstones that you can find throughout the game. I only have 2 currently, but those will apply different affinities, and this will make more sense here in a second. But you have your whetstones, and then also similarly, I guess we can look at that real quick too, Ashes of War in your inventory. So you'll find these, again, as you play through the game, you'll collect more Ashes of War that you can use. Depending on the weapon you have, we'll have certain Ashes of War that work for that weapon. But if we go into the Site of Grace menu and take a look at that, we have our currently equipped weapon, which will appear there. But if you want to look at all of your weapons, you can scroll over and select a particular weapon. But if we use the Claymore as an example, we can select that, and then all of the Ashes of War that are applicable for that weapon can be selected. So we can use Wild Strikes. And then this is where the whetstones come into play. So depending on whetstones or wet knives that you have, that will give an additional affinity that you can choose on top of that Ash of War. So as I scroll through these, if you look at the middle of the screen, that kind of changes like the physical attack power, and then below that also the attributes that scale with that attack. So if we look at like heavy, that's going to use strength more. If we look at keen, that's going to use dexterity more and not so much strength. You can see the strength drop to an E. And then also you can see the impact to the physical attack attributes as well. So again, as you get more whetstones, there's additional affinities that you can apply on top of your Ash of War. We'll just use heavy as an example now. So now this Claymore is going to have the Wild Strikes. We'll switch to the Claymore. And now we have the Wild Strikes attack there, so we can do that. So that's Wild Strikes. And then if we wanted to remove that, kind of the same process, go to Ashes of War, select your Claymore, select that, and then there's an undo enhancement option. So that's going to take it back to the attack that sort of comes with the weapon, which is Lion's Claw. So now the special attack for our Claymore is back at Lion's Claw. Wrapping things up with a few additional kind of miscellaneous things. I did previously mention Talismans earlier. So those are in your equipment menu right here. So eventually you can have up to 4 equipped at a time. I only have 2 slots available currently, so you expand this by finding talisman pouches. The first one you get by defeating Margit, which is kind of the first main boss you'll come across. So now I have 2 that I can apply, but again, there's a whole bunch of these that you'll find as you play through the game, and they're just various enhancements, effects, buffs, things like that. So as you find them, they'll tell you what they do. So this enhances charged attacks. I also have Radagon's Scar Seal, which raises attributes but increases damage taken, things like that. So this one raises maximum stamina. So there's a whole bunch of those, and again, as you play, you'll eventually be able to have 4 of these active at any given time, and they're, again, really useful for making your character more powerful. Another feature that I haven't talked about yet is Spirit Ashes. So these are companions that you can summon to help fight in designated areas and boss fights. So it is limited to certain situations. For example, I can't use them right now. I have mine equipped to my pouch in my right D-pad, so you can see the jellyfish icon there, which is the jellyfish ashes. If I try and use them right now, nothing's going to happen because I'm not allowed to use them in this area. You do need a couple items first in order to summon Spirit Ashes. The first is the Spirit Calling Bell. So that can be found a couple different ways. The first is early game at the first church you come across, this Church of Ella, if that's how you pronounce it, Rena will appear and give you the Spirit Bell. If you don't do that, you can also, which is what I did in this playthrough, once you get to the Table of Lost Grace, you can go there and go to the Maiden Husk merchant, and then you can buy it just directly from them for 100 runes. So that's what I did. But once you got your Spirit Bell, you can then, kind of like Ashes of War and other talismans and things like that, you'll collect these as you progress. But you have a Ashes category in your inventory. I only have the jellyfishes, but there are tons of different Spirit Ashes that you can collect and then choose which companion you want to have as your Spirit Ash. So, as mentioned, can't use them anytime you want, but when you can, so this is actually one of those cases where we get into the area that allows Spirit Ashes. You can see the little archway icon that appeared. So if we back out a little bit, it disappears, can't use them. Get into that area, that then says that you can use the Ashes. So now if we try and use our Ashes, they will appear. That uses FP, as you can see. It took about half my FP to summon that. But now we have this Jellyfish Ash to help fight boss fights and encounters like this dragon and whatnot. Speaking of the Table of Lost Grace, that is a waypoint that you'll get eventually that'll take you to Roundtable Hold. This is kind of a home base kind of thing where there's NPCs and a variety of things happen here. But you'll unlock this kind of naturally as you progress. When you get to that point and you rest at a site of grace, Melina will appear and then you'll kind of lead you and unlock this area. But again, I'm not going to go too much into this, but lots of sort of storyline NPCs live here. The Smith is here. I'll talk a little bit about that later when we get into like weapons and combat and whatnot. But the Maiden Husks, which I mentioned, that's a merchant that has a variety of things, which is useful, is back here. So you can buy a lot of good stuff from them. So there's like rune arcs that you can buy. Again, this is where I got the Spirit Bell. There's another Ash variant that you can buy. So there's the Spirit Bell right there. So obviously you'll kind of come here naturally, but that's just kind of an overview of Roundtable Hold. And then lastly, just kind of finishing up some of this miscellaneous stuff. One thing we haven't talked about yet is death, which is going to happen a lot in this game. So just kind of talking about that mechanic. Really, the main thing that's going to happen in terms of penalties is you're going to lose all your runes, which you can see in the bottom right corner, which are recoverable, so I'll show that. But then you'll kind of get transported back to the last site of grace that you visited before you died. And you also lose things like rune arcs if you have those applied. So as an example, we'll use this guy over here. He's a good candidate to help us demonstrate this. So we'll go die real quick from him. All right, so now we're dead. So again, like I mentioned, you'll see this message a lot. I'm sure as you're probably familiar if you've played Elden Ring before. But you'll get reset back to the last site of grace that you were at, and you'll see that our runes are now down to 0. So I had 8,000. However, it's not a huge deal because you can get them back if you just go back and recover them. That being said, if you die again before you recover your runes, then they're gone permanently. So you want to make sure that you go back and get them before you die again. So you can see the location of them on your compass here. You can also see them on the map here, so it will tell you where they're at. So you can just kind of run through, kind of avoid whatever killed you the last time, retrieve your runes. So now I'm back to where I was originally, so no big deal. And then you can kind of go about your day. So now getting to the last couple categories that I wanted to touch on. The first is just some things around player stats and status, and then moving into weapons and combat. So status and stats, not a whole lot I really want to talk about in too much detail, but a few things. The first is when you go to your status page or any sort of stats that you're interested in, whether it's here or like in your equipment, you can, as you can see in the bottom of the screen, the little help button that you can press. So if you hit that and go into explanation, whatever you're interested in or have questions about, that'll kind of help provide a little bit of description detail. So in the case of your status page, if you wanted to know what vigor and mind and endurance does, that'll kind of help tell you. So you can use that to kind of get more information. Similarly on the right, like all the resistances and things like that. Other than that, the other main call out, just the calling out the equipment load, which you can see in the middle of the screen. So right now, I can carry up to 57.7 weight, and then that's split into 3 different categories: light, medium, and heavy. The main call out there is just making sure that you don't really get into that heavy load category. So I'll kind of demonstrate that. So right now I'm medium load, and I can sort of roll up, I can move around pretty decently. But if I get into that heavy category, which is dependent on how much stuff you have equipped in your equipment slots, so like even if you put a secondary weapon in your right hand, that's going to count towards that. So you can see just adding a second weapon to my right hand slot, that's putting me in the heavy load category, and you can see I'm rolling much more sluggishly. So if you're suddenly wondering why you're not moving as quickly as you used to, it's probably because you're carrying too much stuff. So you kind of have to choose which armor pieces you're using and sort of weigh the defensive impact of that and how much it weighs. Similarly, larger weapons strike harder, but they're also heavier, things like that. So call out there. Finally, getting into some things around weapons and combat. So this is pretty much exclusively going to be around melee combat, so apologies if you're a heavy sorcerer user. But starting off, just kind of taking a look in more detail about the weapons and the information that's provided there. So using Bloodhound's Fang as an example, as you go into your equipment and look at a weapon, you'll have all this information provided in the middle of the screen here. Starting off, just kind of going from top to bottom, it'll tell you what the current skill is for that weapon. So this is Bloodhound's Finesse, and then how much FP cost is going to be required to use that. So that's kind of related to the Ashes of Lore that we talked about earlier. It'll also give you the weight of the weapon. Again, we just kind of talked about that as well. So important to note that some weapons are really, really heavy. Others are really light, so you can sort of use that as you're building out your equip load and taking that into account. Going down below that, attack power. Fairly self-explanatory how much damage that weapon does. However, there are a couple different categories, as you can see. There is going to be physical attack power, and then some weapons will have additional magic, fire, lightning, or holy attack power as well. That's important to take into account as some enemies are stronger or weaker against certain elemental attack power types, so you can kind of use that to decide which weapons you use depending on who you're fighting. And then finally, the critical attack power. So that's going to be related to when you do like a stagger attack or a behind the back sneak attack type thing. Attribute scaling, that's another important thing to consider as well as the attributes required. So you can see there's a letter next to the attributes. That basically is telling you what stats impact the enhancement of that weapon's damage. So in this particular case, dexterity is a C, strength is D. That scale goes from, it starts at S tier is the highest, and then it goes A, B, C, D, E. E would be the lowest. So in this case, increasing my dexterity is going to have a stronger impact than strength on increasing the physical attack power of this weapon. So you can see that in the number next to the base damage. So the base damage is 141, and then it's plus 46. That's based off of my strength and dexterity stats, essentially. And then also you have to factor in the stats that are required just to use the weapon. So you have to, at a minimum, to use this weapon effectively, I need 18 strength and 17 dexterity. And then below that, some weapons have passive effects. So you can see this particular weapon also has a blood loss buildup. So as I'm doing damage, that will sort of get built up, that meter will get built up and then do a blood loss attack. So if we kind of look at other weapons, you can see these stats change. Some, like this weapon has D strength, D dexterity for its attribute scaling. Red is lower compared to my equipped weapon, so this has lower physical damage, but has higher critical attack at 110. So you can kind of compare and contrast current weapons that you have to decide. So as an example, this weapon is really, really heavy. So it's almost twice as heavy as my Bloodhound's Fang, so taking that into account as well. Also, you can see I don't have the required strength for this weapon, so if I try and equip it, you can technically equip it, but the damage is going to be significantly decreased. Similarly, if you're close to a certain weapon, so this one I need 31 strength, I currently have 23 strength. If you equip weapons in dual or two-handed mode, that's going to increase your strength by 50%. So if I have 23 strength, he takes that times 1.5, that's higher than 31. So you can see here, if I try and equip it, it says unable to use this item effectively unless wielded with both hands. So you can sort of get around it that way as well. A couple other things. So first, just explaining how to go into two-handed mode. That is going to be a 2-button combination. So you want to hold down your event button. So the same button that you use to go to your pouch, which I'm doing right now. You can see in the left portion of the screen. Hold that down and then do right attack button. So that's going to go into two-handed mode. And then if you want to go back into single-handed mode, same thing. Hold down that event button or pouch button, and then the right hand attack button, and that'll go back into single-handed mode. There are a couple other things, just kind of random. There is like weapon grease that you can pick up. That's what these are, and that will give you sort of a temporary additional damage of an elemental type. So like this adds blood loss, this adds magic damage, this does fire damage. So you can use those and equip some additional damage temporarily to your weapon. Another call out is the concept of dual wielding or power stancing. So you can equip 2 weapons, one left-handed, one right-handed weapon, as you can see here. However, that's not the full story. You can, again, like right-hand attack. Oops, that's my special attack. Right-hand attack, left-hand attack, right-hand attack, left-hand attack. But the kind of the real power of this is what's called power stancing. And to do that, you need to have 2 weapons of the same category, essentially. So you can see these are sort of organized by category. Each row is sort of its own weapons category. You need to have your right and left hand both using a similar category. So for example, like I can't use these, but it'll work for the purpose of this. If I put that axe in my right hand and then this axe in my left hand, because they are the same type, now I'm doing power stance attacks. So you can see I'm doing the special attack that's both weapons at the same time. You can do like jump attacks like that and whatnot. So dual wielding and power stancing, 2 different concepts essentially, but to actually power stance, which is what you want to do most of the time if you're dual wielding, you got to make sure that you're using 2 of the same weapon type. Lastly, and then we'll get into some like combat demonstrations and examples, you can upgrade your weapons. So this is done at the Smith in Roundtable's Hold, which is this guy right behind me. This is done with smithing stones, which you'll collect, and there is a category for this in your inventory. So there are 2 different types. The first row here is just kind of regular smithing stones. Those are for just regular weapons, generic weapons. And then you've got the white ones, which are somber smithing stones. Those are used to upgrade special weapons like my Bloodhound's Fang. That's a special armament. So you need the special somber smithing stones to upgrade those. Within each type, there's also sort of a level. So this you can see is smithing stone 1, smithing stone 2, smithing stone 3. And in the item effect, it'll tell you. So as you level up your weapon, you require a higher level of smithing stone. So the smithing stone 3, you can see reinforces armaments up to +9. So if we go up to this guy and open up his menu, there's an option for strengthening your armament. And then my currently equipped weapons, my Bloodhound Fang. So this is telling me I need a somber smithing stone level 1 to upgrade this. And then that is going to have the impact of that shown in the menu as well with the blue numbers. So if I were to upgrade this, my weapon would go from 141 to 161 base damage, and then the attribute scaling impact would go from 46 to 57. So once you find sort of a weapon that you like and are invested in, then you can make that even better by collecting and finding smithing stones and then coming here and upgrading them. All right, so now getting into some actual just like combat examples and demonstrations and touching on some things there. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is just the concept of movesets. So I'm not going to do everything. There's a lot of different movesets, and depending on the weapon, it changes. But just kind of going over the main general ones. So I'm currently using this in two-handed mode, but you do have sort of a light attack, and you'll have a combo there as you spam that button. And then there's also a heavy attack, which has its own moveset. There's also a charged heavy attack, so you hold down that heavy attack button, you can do a charge. And then there's other things as well, so like you can do a backstep attack, both heavy, that was heavy, and then backstep light attack. You can do roll light attack. There's a roll heavy attack, and then you can also do things like a sprinting attack and sprinting heavy attack, and then things like jump attacks and whatnot. So again, like the point being is like get creative and make sure you're not just hitting light attack all the time and just doing this over and over and over. There are a lot of different move sets, and depending on the weapon you're using, have a variety of unique movesets. So it's kind of fun to play and experiment around with those. You also have the special attack, which we've talked about a couple times, which uses FP. So some of these have multiple follow-ups to them, so you gotta keep an eye on that as well. Oh, this guy's coming. So, for example, that's just the standard Bloodhound's Finesse, but then if you follow it up with a heavy attack, it then does this additional attack as well. So, similarly, you kind of have to experiment with the various Ashes of War and special attacks that the weapons have, but it's not always just that. Sometimes they have follow-up attacks as well. So just doing that one more time. Doing the special attack and then following it up with a heavy attack does that additional dash. A couple other examples of different attack types you can do. So you can do, if you sneak up on somebody behind the back, and this plays into that critical attack damage. So if you sneak up behind somebody and then if I'm going to hold down my light attack, that does sort of like an assassination type thing. You can also do stagger attacks. So this is kind of a built up sort of invisible meter that as you're fighting somebody, once they get to that stagger meter gets full, they'll kind of collapse and you can do another critical attack. So see if we can get an example here. But, so there, I just got a stagger. So he's fallen down, and then you can come up and follow up with a critical attack. So, as you can see, it does quite a bit of damage, but depending on what weapon you're using, that meter is going to get filled more often. Oh, he's still alive. Come here, dude. Heavier weapons, essentially what I was going to say, heavier weapons will fill up that meter more than like light weapons. So depending on what weapon you use, could be better for getting more staggers than others. You can also parry attacks with a shield, depending if the shield is compatible, and then that will allow you to counter with a critical. So you can see here where my Bloodhound's Finesse used to be called out in the left side of the screen, now it says parry. So if you use like a larger shield, those aren't compatible with parrying, so this is a big giant shield. So this, I would use my Bloodhound's Finesse with this shield. But if you do have a sort of parry compatible shield, rather than using Bloodhound's Finesse, that will now be a parry button. So this is honestly something I'm terrible at, but see if we can get an example here. So basically you just want to time his attack with your shield. Oh, bear with me here. There we go. So then I parried his attack and then I'd follow it with a crit. And then finally, kind of the last main combat mechanic I want to talk about is just stamina management. So again, this isn't like a full comprehensive combat guide or anything, but just sort of the main things. And the last one being stamina. So that is the green bar at the top left of your screen. And as you're just out in the world, it's not really going to be an issue because it doesn't go down. But once you get into combat, as you're doing things, that's going to start depleting. So if we sort of approach these guys and get into a fight. So I attack, and now I'm starting to roll, and you can see my stamina bars going down. So you just want to make sure... Oops, oh shoot, I forgot I've got my parry shield on. Make sure that you're keeping an eye on that and you don't get down to 0 stamina. Because there are going to be times, I guarantee you, I've done it so many times, where you're like, I swore I hit the button to dodge, and I didn't dodge, and it's 99% of the time it's because your stamina was down to 0. So if you try and do something, whether it's attack or dodge, and your stamina is down to 0, you're going to have a bad time. So just making sure that you're being aware of your current status in terms of stamina. Okay, so that was just kind of all of the stuff that I kind of came across doing a fresh playthrough, the main stuff I thought was important to call out. This got me through like Godric the Grafted. So I know I probably left out a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in this game. But I think this is just sort of the main stuff to, again, kind of just get you back into the game if you've taken a break and like me just sort of forgot all this stuff. So hopefully this was helpful. And just kind of wrapping things up, I did want to just spend a couple minutes going through sort of a quick like power leveling guide if you just want to get into a new character and sort of skip all of the early game grind and just sort of get powerful so you can kind of blow through some of the early bosses and whatnot and just sort of get through the game again. So again, I'll kind of get into a couple tips on how you can do that. So first things first, once you make your way through kind of the initial tutorial and make your way out of this building, you'll be at the first step, Site of Grace. And in my opinion, the number one priority is to get Torrent, your horse, just so you have better movement around the map and can get places quicker. So You can get that at the Gatefront site of Grace, so I'd recommend just start heading north essentially, and you can, you know, defeat enemies along the way and whatnot, but you want to make your way here. Once you get there and activate that site of Grace, you'll have a sort of introductory conversation with Melina, and as part of that, she will give you the, let's see, the Spectral Steed Whistle. So you'll have that as a new item. I put it in my pouch on my down D-pad, but that will call Torrent at any time you want, and that'll, again, just give you some better transportation early game to sort of do what you need to do. Next, since we're in the area, we can go over here real quick and grab the Whetstone Knife. As mentioned, this will allow you to apply Ashes of War. Let's see where I gotta find it here. So if you go into this little underground hidden area, there is going to be a chest, and there you can find the Whetstone Knife, so you can grab that real quick. After that, I would backtrack a little bit. Hopefully you got this site of Grace along your way to the gate front, but go back to this church. And there, if you go back, after you've gotten Torrent, your horse, if you go back here during nighttime, Rena will show up, and she will give you the Spirit Calling Bell. That'll allow you to summon Spirit Ashes. So that is this item here. And like I showed earlier when I was talking about this, if you don't do this, you can still get it later at Roundtable's Hold, and you can buy it from the Maiden Husk for 100 runes. So no big deal if you don't do this part, but you can just kind of get this early game if you want to by coming back to this area. Related to that, you can also get some early game Spirit Ashes, the jellyfish, to actually use your Spirit Calling Bell. Past the gate front a little bit, so you'll go through this gate front, make your way up this hill, and then you'll come across this Stormhill Shack. At this shack, there's going to be an NPC that you can talk to, have a conversation with. If you sort of go through and complete that conversation right here, you will get the jellyfish. What is this? Oh, golden seed. Related to that, good topic. There's also golden seeds. So I'm not going to go through where they're all located, but you could search this on Google or whatever and go around and collect golden seeds, and that will allow you to increase the amount of flasks that you have. So going and collecting those as well is going to be very beneficial. Keeping on that same topic, I suppose, the next thing we can talk about is going and getting the Wondrous Physick Flask. So kind of depending on where you want, you could backtrack to Gatefront and then make your way through here, and you're going to want to end up at this Third Church of America. So you're going to want to head there probably at some point early game to get the Wondrous Physick, as well as there's a Sacred Tear there. So as mentioned previously, the Sacred Flask, or Wondrous Physick, is a third flask sort of elixir that you can use, and then Sacred Tears help increase the amount that your FP and HP flasks replenish. So you can find those at a lot of the churches around the world. So like this church, Third Church of America, like down here, I think this church has another Sacred Tear. I think this church has a Sacred Tear. So you can find them in a lot of the churches. So by collecting a lot of those Sacred Tears, you'll also increase the benefit of using those flasks has by increasing the amount of HP or FP that they restore. So you want to head here pretty early game to take care of that as well. Now, since we're over by Caelid, we might as well talk about kind of the big one, which is how to farm runes really quickly and sort of cheese that mechanic. So you can really do this at any point of this, whenever you feel comfortable to go over or feel like you need to start leveling up. You can start heading over to Caelid. And again, because you're probably pretty low level, you're just going to want to run through here as fast as you can. But basically, just make your way eventually up to this site of Grace here, up in the top right corner. And here, there is going to be a pretty easy way to get a lot of runes really quickly. And especially since you're low level, it's not going to take many attempts to do this. But I'll kind of go through the strategy here. So that's the site of Grace. You're going to want to run down this hill if you haven't done this before. And there's going to be a boulder that suddenly just appears. And if you dodge out of the way just in time to make it fall off this cliff. So dodge out of the way. Technically, we killed it, and you can see down at the bottom I just got 2,000 runes roughly. So then you can go and respawn at the site of Grace and do it all over again. So as you get higher levels, this becomes less and less efficient. But at lower levels, you can certainly go from like level 5 to level 20 or whatever really, really quickly doing this. So again, just sort of repeating this over and over run down to this area, wait for the, be careful there, wait for the boulder to spawn, dodge out of the way, it falls off, you get the kill credit, and I get 2,000 runes again. So just repeating that over and over again, and that'll allow you to level up really quickly. And then finally, if you spend some time here farming some runes and leveling up your character, you should be at a point where you're pretty much powerful enough to blow through a lot of this early game stuff. However, you probably need a weapon to take advantage of that. So I would recommend getting the Bloodhound's Fang. It's honestly, I think, one of the best weapons in the game, and you can get it super early pretty easily. So I would recommend using that. As you're leveling up your character, if you are going to do that, just keep in mind you do need 18 strength and 17 dexterity as the minimum requirements. But this weapon is found, again, back right kind of where you start at the first step. If you just head south here to this Everjail, you'll have like a little sort of mini boss fight that you need to defeat. He's not too bad, but he can be difficult if you're, again, sort of lower level. So depending on how much time you've spent at this rune farm, it may or may not be an easy fight. With that in mind, if you don't have a good weapon yet, what I did, I just quickly went south here even more down to this Castle Morn because the Claymore is there. So kind of what I did was I first went here, got the Claymore so I could fight the boss to get the Bloodhound's Fang, and then got the Bloodhound's Fang, and I've been using that up until now. So if you go to Castle Morn, I just took the Site of Grace, but if you take this lift up, and then head through here, you can just sort of run through these enemies and then make your way up to the top of this hill. Once there, if you hang a sharp right and go into this room, there is going to be a chest right around the corner here. So this will have the Claymore in it. So basically I grabbed that and then I used the Claymore to defeat the boss in the Everjail to get me the Bloodhound's Fang. And again, that mixed with, depending on what your level is, oh, screw you, buddy. Depending on, again, how much you've leveled up. Okay, you're ruining my video, guys. By that point, you should be able to get through like Margit and go through Godric the Grafted. Obviously, this is just sort of the preliminary things. There's a lot of other items you probably want to collect along the way, but at this point, at least you'll have enough power to sort of blow through all this early game stuff. So anyways, I'll stop rambling. Hopefully this was all helpful. Again, like I said, I sort of jumped back into Elden Ring and sort of in anticipation of the DLC coming out and felt a little bit lost. So hopefully this helps sort of ease that transition a little bit for people like me. So thanks for watching as I finish taking care of these guys here. And we will catch you in the next one. Bye.